All right. Hello and good afternoon, good day for those who are joining us live here on the CFF's live session. And Happy New Year to you all. Happy New Year to you, Farah, thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I've been looking forward to it. We missed you at the Cyber Summit. I knew you cannot stand in a hurricane and bad weather.
Yeah.
So glad to have you. Maybe it worked out well because now we can find more time to speak with you about the work you have done and what you're set out to do. So as many of you know, that the session that we are on has been set up to serve as a master mentor session. And we have in the Society of Mentors, we need more and more inspiring stories, learning lessons, and then motivations from all the hard work that has been done by master mentors like Farah joining us today. And the holidays, if they were not 2020 was not busy enough with all kinds of unprecedented and weird situations and events. We just went through the whole solar winds and the solar gate attack. And I would not call it just attack, but it was a range of cyber espionage leading on crime and a lot of malfeasance in many ways. I think this is a very important topic that we're discussing today with respect to the cyber and the different aspects of risk, security, peace, war, however you bring it on. Our community in general has been more oriented towards the technical risk as well as the overall, the overarching risks around it. But I think we have yet to pay attention. We are yet to pay attention to the actual geopolitical and the sociological aspects of it. And of course, a lot of this relates to the different stakeholders that are there and that we need to work with. And this is not a national security problem, just nationally contained. It's an international global problem. I sometimes think about this as probably as much as climate change and cyber probably can go hand in hand. But in today's session, we are really fortunate to have Farah Pandith. Farah is a world leading expert and pioneer in countering violent extremism. And you can imagine what we have lived with in the last decade and probably last 20 years with an increasing escalation of extremism in many different forms. Starting from the start of this century, I think we have dealt with it, and there are very many brave souls, and I would say that that have went on to counter this directly in person. Sarah is probably one of those pioneers. She's a senior fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, an adjunct senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, and a senior advisor at the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. I could just go on. I typically don't have a paper printed out for bios, but I think it's worth mentioning that she has a very long winding career. Just prior to coming to this session, we talked about that she had many firsts, many that didn't have any precedent or any pathways defined to achieve the outcomes that she has been tasked with. And that's why I loved about other than the expertise about this session, but also the actual leadership that comes out of Sarah's experience. Farah, welcome to this session, and please share with us your leadership journey. I think you have a very interesting career behind you, and there's a lot that is ahead of you. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, first of all, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where your viewers are watching us. But I do want to say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that this is a year that is blessed with good health and safety. We've gone through a very challenging year, all of us globally. And so I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you in a fresh year with a fresh outlook. And I want to thank you so much for the invitation to talk a little bit about leadership and what's on our plate as we look at the 21st century. Val, you asked me to give you an overview about my career journey, and I'm not sure what that even means. But I will say this: I think like everyone, you know, when you look back at your life and twists and turns along the way, you try to find places that actually made a difference, made a clear difference in the way you thought about yourself, your skill set, and the things that you're really interested in. And I have been very, very fortunate to have had early on a deep recognition that the time I want to spend on this planet needs to be time that is heartfelt, meaning that it made sense for my own passion. So I have always been very clear about what speaks to me and what's important to me. It's not, you know, I'm not driven by title. I'm not driven by money, frankly. I'm driven by the value set that I put forward and what I'm going to do with the time I have on planet Earth. That may sound really airy-fairy, but I think it's important because I think it speaks to an authenticity in terms of the work that I've done and the people who have been kind enough to give me an opportunity. So I've had two very different experiences in my professional career. I did spend some time in the private sector, but the majority of my time has been in the public sector. And I've been lucky to serve as a political appointee, and I think that's important to say in the context of the insanity that is happening in our country around political parties. I have been a political appointee for both parties. I served, my first job out of college was in the George W. Bush, the H.W. Bush administration at the U.S. Agency for International Development, where right out of college, I was doing all kinds of things that you would imagine somebody right out of college doing. But I feel very fortunate because I worked for the administrator of that agency, which allowed me a bird's eye view of how we deliver economic and humanitarian aid. And I got really excited about the work that we were doing as a country and public service, frankly. I went back to graduate school to focus what I thought was going to be on humanitarian and development work. And I didn't even take one class in that when I was in grad school because I got really interested in international security studies. And when I came out of that experience, I went to the private sector for a bit, but after 9/11, those are one of the moments that I was talking about, where you suddenly understand what you're supposed to be doing. And for me, when we were attacked on 9/11, I felt extremely strongly that there was something I needed to do to serve. Anything, it didn't matter. I wanted to go back in. And so I feel very fortunate that I got back into government after 9/11 with the help of the law firm that I worked for, who were Democrats and Republicans, who understood that I wanted to serve my nation as an American, as a Muslim. I felt like I could do something at this very difficult time for our nation. And so they helped me come back into government. And so I served in the George Bush administration. And I worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development in the beginning. And then I went to Afghanistan on an assignment, came back, and was very fortunate to have a chance to work at the National Security Council at the White House, which I did for some time, and then was asked to go to the State Department. Again, this is the beginning of the work that we were doing on how to prevent young people from finding the ideology of extremism interesting. So that's really the beginning of that next chapter after 9/11, when both at the National Security Council and at the State Department, we were trying to design programs to inoculate communities from what the bad guys were doing. When President Obama was elected, I was actually supposed to leave. I had another job lined up. And I was fortunate to be able to brief Hillary Clinton in January of 2009 about the work that we had done. And what she said to me then was, I want you to do what you've been doing, but I want you to do it broadly, globally. And so she created the position of special representative to Muslim communities to do that. So I served in the Obama administration as well. I'm not a political creature, frankly, Val. I am a public servant, though, and I do feel very strongly that if you feel called to serve and you ignore it, you're going to miss out on one of the most incredible honors of a lifetime. So for me, having a chance to serve in that way has been amazing. But just to conclude, I will say that the career, the leadership experience early on was because colleagues in government gave me the opportunity to hear the ideas that I had to do the work that I did. And I think that's a universal lesson as we think about what's happening around a policy table or a boardroom table. Are you building inclusive tables to think through ideas and challenges and problem solving in a different way? So I left government in 2014. And I have a perch at the Council on Foreign Relations and at the Kennedy School of Government. And I wrote a book last year called How We Win. So that's my political and public sector and private sector journey for you.
Well, that's a lot, and congratulations on all the achievements. I believe that tees up for the rest of our conversation, as well as what you're looking to do, right? I think a lot of the lessons that we are thinking of gleaning through your experience and learning is primarily around your work on the extreme, kind of countering the extremism side, right? Because I think right now we have a silent extremism going on the cyber side, where young people, for a good chunk of change, are able to just take on a job and do something that they don't realize adds up to the cyber threats, attacks, and all that we see, right? And I think we'll get there. But tell us a little bit about your experience in the global role that you had. I think that's a phenomenon. That's one of the firsts again, right? I don't think there was a role or position like that before that you served.
Well, listen, being special representative to Muslim communities in the Obama administration was extraordinary. And it was extraordinary because I had a great team of people who all understood the power of soft power. Okay. Mm-hmm. Engagement is soft power. It's non-kinetic. It means, how do you listen and how do you engage? How do you build bridges of common understanding? Obama was very clear in his framing of trying to build dialogue based on mutual interest and mutual respect. And so what we were able to do as a team, and I wasn't obviously the only one at the State Department doing this, but can you find ways to find common ground? Can you lift up voices that are not always heard? Can you build networks of like-minded thinkers? And the work that I did, I was dedicated to listening to what young Muslims were thinking about around the world. It wasn't we're going to tell you how you need to think. Rather, it was the other way around. Whether you were a Muslim living in Suriname or you were living in Surabaya, we wanted to hear what you were thinking about and how you were exploring your identity and what you thought about the world. 9/11 shifted the entire ecosystem for these young Muslims. I mean, as an American Muslim growing up outside of Boston, let me tell you, I was never asked about my religion growing up. I was never looked at with a funny expression. I was never called a terrorist. None of those things happened to me. For young Muslims that are growing up in the world today, whether they're in America or they're in other parts of the world, there is an increased attention to them because of these horrendous attacks that happened. And so I look at these young kids and I want to know what they are thinking, what they are feeling, how they're exploring their identity, because as we talked about, bad actors understand that these young kids are going through an identity crisis. Now, I want to be clear about something, Val. We are going to talk about extremists of all kinds. And of course, there are also extremists that are preying upon non-Muslim youth as well to join their armies. And we can talk about that. But the job that I was asked to do as special representative brought me to almost 100 countries around the world during my time in the Obama administration. So when I walked out, I was able to see the commonalities of a young kid talking to me in Dushanbe and a young kid talking to me, on the other side of the planet. And remarkably, so much of what they had to say about what they were feeling in a post 9/11 world was the same. And so what we did was we built using the platform of technology primarily. How do we connect the voices of these young people so that they are talking to their peers in new ways and they're fostering positive ideas and content, and get the kind of support that they need. I will say this: I believe very strongly that one of the weaknesses we have, both in the public sector and in the private sector, as we've begun to talk about these communities, we're talking about a gigantic, seismic demographic. I mean,
Yeah.
young Muslims under the age of 30 are 1 billion strong. Okay, and we don't have, while there are people whose job it is to culturally listen, to
Right.
understand the nuances that's happening between a millennial versus a Gen Z, we do not apply that kind of nuance to bespoke action for how to make their lives better from the policy perspective. And that goes for climate change, that goes for poverty eradication, that goes for education. We've got to listen better. We've got to understand better. And those are some of the things that became very clear to me in the work that I did.
Well, I think that's so significant and also so much humbling, right? And in the sense that this while the scale of the as it relates to the Muslim young population, if you compare that to what we are seeing in the Black Lives Matter movement and all the others, right? I mean, it's similar, right? There people are looking for attention, for care, for due recognition of their rights. And this goes to the fundamental human values that we all adhere to, and I think it could serve everyone. Unfortunately, I've grown up in a secular surrounding, and worked for a company which values diversity, inclusion, and I didn't feel. But I think you have seen it in a lens, in a completely different lens, talking to these people who are actually on the opposite side and are not receiving the benefits of the societal and economic growth that we are seeing probably mostly around the world, right?
Exactly, and this isn't just sort of an American perspective. It's something that I would say to every nation in the world. How are you listening? And if you cannot. I believe strongly that obviously there are so many challenges that we're all facing. It cannot be that people living in ivory towers are the ones that determine the answers to so many of these problems. We've got to get clear on cooperative problem solving in new ways, and part of that is to include the people that are in civil society. What do they think? What are they experiencing? The successes of the Bush and Obama engagement with Muslims was about the way in which we took the time to listen. I remember often, when I was in this role as special representative, and certainly in the work that I did in the Bush administration, when I was engaging with Muslims in Europe, they would be puzzled that the United States was taking the time to talk with them as opposed to them, and
Yeah.
and often, we learned a lot. And I think that understanding the experiences of communities and understanding that the grassroots has a great deal of insight to how problems can be solved is a wonderful thing for government to really partner in new ways. And it's not that government doesn't recognize the importance of civil society or grassroots, but I think we need to amplify that component in a much larger scale.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that's a way to go forward, right? I mean, if you look at all the lessons that you can glean from your experience, as well as the impact that it had, and the challenges that we are dealing with now, it's the inclusiveness and listening to people and getting their ideas built in, rather than trying to react and trying to solve a problem after something bad happens. From our community standpoint, when we talk about Cyber Future Foundation, and one of the things that we really put ourselves into is to communicate from the cyber world to the non-cyber world, so to speak, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just like your experience was about communicating, America's vantage point and getting to listen also from the other side. Maybe, we talk a little bit about the leadership that it needs, right? It needs it needs a lot of empathy. It needs a lot of leadership skills. Where do you think you were most successful in terms of getting the best out of your role?
Well, I think that's a super question. I think that three, sorry, there are three components here. One is, are you part of a team? Are you part of a team that gives you a runway to be able to be creative? And I was, both in the Bush and Obama administrations. I was very fortunate that I wasn't put into a silo and was not given the opportunity for innovation and creativity. So it was sort of like, let Farah run with it. Let her do what she needs to do. How do we think out of the box? That's one really important piece. The second is, I think, lesson for all of us is the way we speak. I mean, you talked about a cyber community talking to a non-cyber community. I think this us versus them is so dangerous in ways that people don't even recognize that they're doing it. So when, language matters, lexicon matters, how you think about inclusivity. It's not just to say that diversity is important or be respectful to everybody. What's the language you're using? How are you engaging? Are you bringing different voices to the table just routinely, not as a special thing? So I think some of those successes had to do with that consciousness of, when we are speaking, we're giving dignity to everybody. I talked earlier about, whether you're in Suriname or Surabaya, that's not just sort of a flip thing to say. There isn't some sort of world order of the most important Muslims versus the least important Muslims. Everybody is equal. So if you are living as a minority in a country and you happen to be Muslim, as special representative, I gave you as much value and as much dignity as I would as a Muslim living in a Muslim majority country. That sounds obvious. It isn't always obvious. I will tell you, I remember when I was choosing the first trip that I was going to go on, there was a lot of pressure within the Department of State that I pick a country in the Middle East to visit on my very first visit as special representative. And I determined that just because of the work that I had done in the Bush administration, that I wasn't going to do that. I was going to pick a part of the world that was, every part of the world's important, but I was going to do something outside of the typical thing. I went to Nigeria. That was my first visit as special representative. Why? Because first of all, more Muslims live outside of the Middle East than in it. Yeah. Secondly, it was really important that I sent a signal that we were going to be equal across the world. Africa mattered. And I wanted to pick a nation that had an ancient history of Islam. I picked Nigeria. I could have picked a lot of other countries in Africa. But anyway, my point being, the consciousness of inclusion, the consciousness of diversity and respect and dignity and civility is part of the reasons why the work that we did, I thought, were very successful. You can talk about being empathetic. One can talk about being compassionate. One can talk about civility, but you have to live it. And what we tried to do is to bring those values to the table, because I absolutely believe, and I'm not drinking Kool-Aid here, the way President Obama went about talking about his desire to build bridges with Muslims was authentic and real. It came from a position of I thought, great clarity in terms of what needed to be done and how we needed to do it. And so, as one of many other people at the Department of State who was asked to do things in his administration, it was very important to me that I made everybody understand that mutual respect that he talked about was something that we were going to deploy in everything that we did.
No, well, that's that's great to know, and it's also a little bit insightful when it comes to the fact that these are all long-term solutions, right? These are like sometimes hundreds and centuries and thousands years old of of belief and misbelief and misgivings and information that are perceptions and barriers that it will break down, right? And it would probably take more than a couple of lifetimes to probably do that. And when you are on the outset, right, you, as you mentioned about prioritizing where you're going to go first, right? I mean, I think that was probably because, you know, you had a journey already and you are at a certain milestone. People are joining you at that moment to make it happen, right? So, you know, to put that into practice, I would say when we are dealing with a lot of cyber challenges, this comes from nation states, this comes from organized crime, this comes from, you know, people, activists, I mean, you name them, there are people out there, and it has become more and more easier. It has become easier for people who are upset or who have a agenda that's different from ours to find ways to disrupt our normal life and you know, to challenge the way we do, you know, economically or socially we carry out our daily life. What is your take on the motivation there, and how can we address that motivation to, you know, from disrupting indirectly to actually engaging directly?
Well, I mean, look, I think the genie is out of the bottle, and bad actors are learning from bad actors.
Yeah.
Whether they buy into the ideology or not, if you're ISIS and you've done something really well, the KKK is going to copy your playbook. You know, they have different ideologies. However, they see what works, and you want to you want to have a winning strategy. So if you are a cyber criminal and you want to steal money, or you want to sell artifacts, or you want to, whatever you want to do, you're learning what's possible. You're playing the game. We are in such a dangerous moment in human history because there's so many fronts open for bad actors to operate, both online and offline.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the particular slice of this, the tiny, compared to, I mean, there's so much going on, this issue of radicalization and what bad actors are doing to lure in youth. And let me be really clear on this. They are working 24/7
Mm-hmm.
on this mission. It
Yeah.
isn't like,
Yeah.
you know, they're like, oh, I'll do it today and I won't do it tomorrow.
Not going taking breaks and holidays.
Right. They're building their knowledge every minute of every day, that they try this, they try that. They see what works. It's not just selling one kind of way of getting a young person. It's trying it on many platforms. It's trying to do a lot of different things. So why is that important? It's important because we have to understand, as non-criminal people, non-bad actors, good actors, that we've got to fortify ourselves by understanding what's taking place and talking about it. And I don't think, frankly, that now we're talking America, within our country, you know, it's still super scary to think about terrorists over there, or extremists, or what they might be doing, and not understanding that it actually comes back directly to the individual and how you operate with your laptop or your smartphone.
Yeah.
It is an individual, it's one-on-one recruitment. It's not en masse. It's not like they've all gone to a sports stadium and they're drinking Kool-Aid and all of a sudden they become radicalized. They are learning about these bad ideologies one-to-one. So what can we be doing consciously to help our good environment understand what's happening with the bad actors who are trying to get into it? So I think about this, and I think that there are two pieces to this, Val. One is the conversations we need to be having within our home about cyber hygiene, about all of these things that seem unseemly. We do this, and we talked about this in a panel that you and I were on a few months ago. But we are very comfortable as a society talking to our young kids about not getting into a car with a stranger, or being aware of sexual predators online. We do not have that same consciousness and that same effort with bad actors who are trying to lure our children into their extremist organizations. And we've got to be, right? So that's one piece. The second is sort of the policy side. And that's the side, obviously, that I've been in for the last almost 20 years, since 9/11. And that is that what we have allowed as a community to be okay. And so what we haven't done is to have the conversation, and we've let everything slide. It's like, oh, this is just another horrible thing that's happened. We're moving the needle, the red line, I should say, on what's acceptable. And it should not be acceptable to allow social platforms to be able to allow hate and extremism to grow and thrive. We are a petri dish of anything and everything growing. And so that consciousness, in my view, has to come to the table. So it's really important as we think about the solution set, like what's actually possible for us to be doing to protect ourselves, to build a better future for our children and for ourselves. We've got to be able to make some hard decisions about how to get to the places that we need to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really helpful. Well, I wanted to also dive into a little bit of psychology and how people see us, right, as a country. And of course, we are probably one of the biggest targets of cyber attacks and threats in many forms. And cyber attack is just probably another form of threat, right? In my travels around the world, what I've seen and heard and even experienced personally is that people just don't see us as good. And I think I was in a panel with another group, and probably Chris Inglis probably put it really right. There are a lot of people who don't think we are doing the right thing. We haven't done the right thing for a long term as a nation, and there's a lot of pent up anger, and they just think we don't get a lot of sympathy when we're attacked or when we have these issues, right? From your experience, what do you think? How can you change that conversation as to this is a global issue? It's not a US or national. It is, as I said, it's national security, but it's international stability also, right? When something as basic as the entire server monitoring system as supply chain gets attacked, it's not just US who's getting the impact. It's going to be a global impact. What do you say to those who have reservations about our conduct and see this as a why do we care?
Well, look, I think that the context of the last year with COVID is a perfect parallel on one level. And that is, why does leadership matter? And what is the US role in a global crisis? And if America does not come forward to help lead, to offer that role as convener and facilitator, if we sit back and let things happen to the climate, to an invisible virus, anything goes. And we've seen that. If America takes a role in a forward posture that says, you know what, we've decided we're going to do this. We want every house in the world to have a red door, and we're going to start here in America. We're going to paint all of our doors, and we begin to see a conversation globally that says, why are they doing that? What have they learned? What it offers. I'm not saying that everybody's going to copy everything America does, but America does have a role in the world that offers us great opportunity. And so when I look at the disaster of the crisis that we've faced with COVID over 2020, and the lack of leadership, the American leadership globally, not just in our own country, you see what we see. I mean, you see what we see. We are in the situation we are in today because of that. And I'm not making a political statement. It is a reality statement. We have a horrifying moment to look and reflect at. Now, I do think when we're looking at the cyber piece, we've looked away for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
On my stuff, just simply the radical, we've been screaming about the power of kids to get radicalized online since 2003. Okay. And not necessarily on the platform. Twitter wasn't around then. Yeah. Facebook, we didn't, whatever. But think about this, Val. Osama bin Laden was able to put up his videos on YouTube for hours, his sermons for hours on. Why? Because we're like, well, we believe in freedom of speech, which we do. And, it's a platform that he's allowed to use. And so he did.
Yeah.
and so
They
we
will
did.
too. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
So it took us a little bit of time to get to the place where we're like, actually, he's a terrorist and he just did this whole thing and maybe we should take his stuff down. Took us a little bit of time. But my goodness, Val,
Yeah.
like on the radicalization stuff, I am not saying that you can flip a switch, but their consciousness has been there for a very long time and we haven't led, we haven't pushed. Our solution here may not be with the social media companies exactly what the EU is doing, but they've had pretty hard conversations. Their populations have demanded of their representatives to do more because they understand the harms that are taking place for young people. What we've done is we've talked about it on the side. We've said to the technology companies, we know you're trying, that's okay, that's really good. It isn't good enough. And yeah. I have no doubt that because I know, I mean, they have tried to do some things, but Val, when you're asking about leadership, America can do far more and put far more pressure on the environment that we are in that allow bad actors to thrive online, whether you're talking about the stuff that I work on, like radicalization, or you're talking about cybercrime, or you're talking about other things.
We have a platform, we should use it, right? I mean, we have an opportunity, we have a platform that could change and lead the world, continue to lead the world, right? So I feel the passion, Farah, and I think this calls for probably another session just on that topic. But as we kind of get into the last few minutes of this session, I think this leads to, I would probably take one question here from one of our guests about what are your expectations for 2021 related to external policies. I think in a lot of this is us being absent from the external stage and or looking the other way, or maybe just not being there. And what are your expectations if you were to put a wish list together?
Well, I think that we're going to see a huge change in the words and actions in substance and in symbolism in terms of American leadership. I don't think you're going to see us sitting on the back burner anymore as we have done for the last 4 years. I think you're going to see dramatic involvement, re-engagement, innovative thinking. There's a lot on the docket here for things that are problematic and difficult and challenging. But I also think that there's something to be said about the level of despair and frustration and anger and deep exhaustion of the American people about so many things. And they don't want to see the next 20 years of their life go by in the same way. And I think that is going to put some pressure on swift action and innovative action. And let me make a point too, not just on the policymakers, because the business sector has a role to play here too.
Yeah.
And I get very excited when I think about the possibilities of creativity and innovation for the business sector on solving some what could be considered to be pretty traditional policy issues. But I think that there's a space there for new thinking. We cannot do things the old way. And I want to bring in one more point. We haven't talked about this specifically, but I for those of you who have read my book or have heard me speak before, I am very conscious of the fact that the different generations that we're talking about, whether it's millennials, Gen Z, or now Gen Alpha that are coming up, we've got to understand how all of these horrendous events will affect them psychologically. That's what you asked earlier, Val. Yeah. What is the emotional and psychological impact on these generations, and how will it change the way businesses think about their bottom line, think about their role in communities, and how government thinks about what they ought to be doing? I don't think there's going to be a lot of patience for sitting back and letting the climate implode and watching from the sidelines. I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think we're going to see sort of health not be an issue anymore. I don't think we're going to look the other way on hate. I've been, my whole 2019 during the book tour was all about how we've looked the other way and have been lazy on hate. Whether we're talking about white supremacists or we're talking about ISIS, we have a huge problem with bad actors trying to recruit and build division. So
Yeah.
do you think that millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to sit back and think that's okay? I don't think so.
No, no. I mean, I think that's really telling, because from just my professional experience, I see the young people, they're more cause oriented than probably we were. I mean, we were, I would say, at the expense of myself, I would say we're very career oriented, whereas the younger people, they're more cause oriented, and probably they're seeing just too much now to be driven by one cause or the other. And this might be a pivotal moment in the history where, if you don't catch them young and train them on the good stuff and put them to good work, I mean, there is a good chance that the bad actors will pick them up, and that they will be put to really bad use. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope this conversation will stimulate a lot of positive action from here. And in fact, I would want to announce that we are working on a cyber peace goal, because there's been a lot of work on the cyber peace norms. Now, the challenge with norms is that norms are a bit more policy oriented, complicated. You have to have very objective and clear goals, and people need to subscribe to them. If they understand and rally behind you on the goals, which is, for example, happening on the climate change, because people's goals are very clear on that, right? I think in the last year, we saw a very clear goal orientation on the diversity, on the civil rights side. And I hope that happens on the cyber side as well. We need to have very clear goals. If somebody is acting deliberately, and it's not a question of if, like they are acting deliberately on cyber espionage, devastating our supply chains, we need to know that which goals they are looking for as a country or as an organized crime unit. So your lessons are absolutely relevant here, Farah. Thank you for inspiring us. And this audience, and this session will be available for our folks who would be going through our apprenticeship programs, our mentorship programs, and hopefully there's a lot of long-term lessons that they can carry on, both in terms of leadership, but as well as how to change and tackle big problems that you have done in your personal life. So thank you, Farah. Thank you for joining us. And I'm sure we are not finished here. There's so many important topics to contribute to. So with that, wish you a very happy new year to all you can, and to you, Farah. Thank you for joining us. We'll speak soon. Thank you.
For sure. And thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.